And the kind of responsibility required of you as a student in the ashram is nothing. I hate to tell you this. It's the least of it. I mean, how much discipline is there really involved in the conditions you've been given? They're all very ordinary, if you notice. Just simple, life-supporting, natural, ordinary, pleasurable life. And that is true. But even as ordinary or natural as it is, as lawful as it is sufficient to be entirely offensive to a subhuman life, a life in ignorance. These simple conditions are enough to test and try every possible kind of complex so-called human condition. The offenses are there for everyone. And you notice how childish you are as soon as you get a little offended, as soon as you can't, at will, do a few of the crazy things that you're used to injecting into the routine of your life over a year's time. You get petulant, you get crazy. You want to go and do it. Well, when I was doing the equivalent of your student sadhana, I was inclined, I felt these inclinations. These tendencies are there to be dealt with. To become matters of your responsibility. It's not that you're not supposed to be aware of tendencies, but there is a higher process to which you are fundamentally committed, and which you would not abandon under any conditions. And so you must pass through the difficulties created by your tendencies at times. And that's what it is to be a human being. Everything else is just subhuman. Exploitation of the mechanisms only. Human life is responsibility, consciousness. So you must bring that kind of manliness, whether you are male or female, to the process of this sadhana. It is not that you've been given some little technique by which to focus your attention in some subtle center, so that you can forget the body and all of its complications. And by continuing to focus on that subtle something or other, you drift out of this world into heavenly wonderments. You haven't been given such a process. And such a process isn't true. The real process that is in God is all a matter of responsibility. It involves a moral transformation of life and consciousness, a complete transformation, a restoration to the law of sacrifice of your gross life. You can't abandon it by focusing your attention somewhere and have that be liberation. You can temporarily change your experience if you do that with enough interest. But you wind up back where you have karmas. There must be the moral transformation, or the return to consciousness and responsibility of the dimension in which you are appearing. On that basis, then there is the appearance of other kinds of transformation. And for the same purpose, to test you to the point of consciousness and responsibility. Not to entertain you, or to give you a 1,000-year lifetime rather than a 70-year lifetime, or whatever, in a better place. So it requires a great deal of you, but once you decide to do it, it is very interesting and happy. And in general, to come to the point of maturity takes years. There must be that intense commitment and involvement for years before there's maturity. Not an end phenomenon of some super state, but just maturity. Real responsibility for the spiritual process as a totality. And that maturity goes on and develops eternally, without time. But to come to that point of maturity, to come to the point where you are doing the sadhana of a devotee, essentially is a matter of years, in some cases many, many years, in some cases maybe many lives. But since you have essentially begun it, or willing to begin it, I am willing for it to be resolved in this lifetime, because I'm not coming back here. There are no conditions under which I would come back to this place. There will be an ashram here for those who come in the future on their second and third time through. But I'm willing for it to be conclusive, not only this lifetime, but long before your death, so-called, in this world. But if it is going to be true, you are going to have to cease to resort to your childishness. You must do this sadhana with great intensity, with great ordinary maturity. And pass through this process that is entirely offensive to all of your tendencies. It is absolutely true that this process of sadhana offends all of your tendencies, which means it offends you absolutely, in every way, in every dimension in which you have existence or may realize existence. And you will feel that offense. You will feel your resistance. You will feel all kinds of tendencies and so forth. That are anything but the availability to this satsang and its sadhana. You will definitely have all those kinds of experiences. And you'll be tested by them, because you must pass through them. That is what sadhana is about. And there are times when it is extremely difficult beyond belief, and you must go through those times. Those are the most valuable, the most purifying times. But as soon as it gets a little difficult, you want to blow it. And if your approach to me is wonderful and full of love and sacrifice, as it should be, then all of these karmas that must be seen, must become your responsibility, can be shown to you easily. I am willing for it to be shown to you in a dream, or in just a brief moment, some little circumstance that comes and goes. Perfectly willing for you to understand that dimension in yourself that you must understand. And on just such an occasion, I'm willing for these karmas to pass in easy ways, such as dreams and simple circumstances. But if your approach is not whole, not direct, not one of service, consciously lived all the time, well, to the degree that you don't live such sadhana in my company, you must suffer your karmas as they stand. And they will still be awakened in you by virtue of the force of this company that you keep with me. But they will be awakened as they tend to appear in your life. In gross ways, then. Outwardly, in the waking state. And it all has to be very dramatic then, very heavy. But it's unnecessary. If you are a little intelligent, a little happy, a little free in my company, well, then you can grasp it. Some little lesson. But some people have to be beaten half to death to stop chewing a fingernail, as I was mentioning at dinner tonight. You know, the little lesson they have to get requires incredible circumstance. And, oh yeah, wow. Well, that's what this life is. This life is just such a lesson. And it would not be necessary if you were straight. But it has happened. But by becoming straight or taking on the form of sadhana in this life, you can make all the necessary lessons much easier, much simpler. It can be a classier passage. And this is one of the effects of this prasad. In other words, it makes it possible for this entire affair to become a matter of responsibility in this lifetime, independent of that sadhana, that satsang, that prasad, that grace. It is absolutely impossible for most human beings to complete the cycle of realization in a single lifetime. There are a few at random that appear in the human plane that have a little bit left. So they seem to have it all happen very easily, very quickly. But for the usual man, independent of the real process of satsang, their transformation and liberation relative to manifest things is a matter of lifetimes, billions and billions of lifetimes. Numberless lifetimes. How many is a billion? This is true. Now there's some sense in which all of that is amusing. And the dumber you are, the more likely you are to be amused by it. But there's really nothing amusing about it at all from my point of view. It has never been amusing to me. It's insane, this life, as it is lived. So it was perfectly obvious to me that there was nothing to do but sadhana. Life had nothing else about it that was worth the suffering. I didn't become a pleasureless man, obviously, at any point in my life. But I made life sadhana, and this required great discipline and great humor. And it requires the same of you. The way of the siddhas is simple and easy because it doesn't take billions of lifetimes. But it requires a hell of a lot in one lifetime. And yet, it requires nothing. Someday you will look at it and see that it required nothing at all. That you did nothing. It all seemed very dramatic at the time, and yet it involved nothing at all. You gotta stop being children, you gotta stop being laid back, you gotta stop coughing. All these little childhood diseases you're all suffering from. You've got to be present with force, with energy, with life. You've got to kick ass. And lay it at my feet every time you come to me, which means all day. Eventually you will have laid it all down. And you will have gotten everything back. But if you bring nothing, if you literally bring me a piece of fruit, be warned. So the play between us is the theater of sadhana. Requires great responsibility and consciousness and discipline. On the other hand, is also amusing, and pleasurable and interesting. And I expect you to do it all and not complain. And when I ask you how you are, I want to hear that you're good. And I don't want to see any coming and going and all that nonsense. Just do what you have to do and get it started, and it goes on forever. Everything else is quick.